Hi, welcome to Shakespeare Month for December 2017, our first month together. I'm really excited to announce that the first play we're going to be exploring together is Twelfth Night, or What You Will. And I chose this play for a few reasons. I was thinking what to start with. There are so many that I love. And Twelfth Night stood out because it's really funny. The plot is pretty simple until the last act, and the characters are great. And it was originally, the first recorded performance is 1602 for the Twelfth Night celebrations, which are at the end of Christmas time on January 6th. So it's kind of the end of all the revels of the holidays. And so I thought it would be good for December, for Christmas. There's a lot of merriment, and actually in Elizabethan times, the holidays and Twelfth Night was a lot of masquerades and zaniness and topsy-turviness, and they had someone called the Lord of Misrule at a party, and it was just things were not as usual, which definitely fits in with this play. So I'm going to talk about the plot. So when you watch the play, you'll know the basics of what's going on, and you can really enjoy the language and the comedy that goes along with it, and any kind of deeper truths that you might discern from watching it. Okay, so we're going to get started with the characters and the plot. So Twelfth Night starts out with our main character, Viola. We find her shipwrecked. She thinks that her twin brother Sebastian, who she was with on the ship, has died because they got separated. So she's on this, washes up on shore of this strange land, Illyria, and decides to disguise herself as a man that'll be much safer for her, and she gets herself a job as the Duke Orsino's page. So her job as his page mostly is to try to woo the woman he's in love with, who won't see him. So that's Viola's basic start. Now, Olivia, the woman that Duke Orsino loves, she is in mourning because her father and brother have both died, and she's especially in mourning for her brother, saying she's not going to look at any man for 7 years, and she just wants to live with her grief. So she doesn't want to hear anything from the Duke Orsino, but when Viola, as Cesario, I'm going to refer to her as Cesario because that's how she's known throughout the whole play. So Cesario comes to woo Olivia on behalf of the Duke, and Olivia falls in love with Cesario, obviously not knowing that he's really a girl in disguise. Meanwhile, Cesario/Viola has fallen in love with the Duke. It seems like they have really, or the Duke at least has confided his heart to her, and she's just in love with him. So she gets caught in a tough situation where she's in love with the Duke, but she can't tell him because he thinks she's a boy, and then Olivia, thinking she's a boy, is in love with her, which sucks because nothing good can come of that, but she's getting pursued by Olivia, thinking she's a boy and she's a girl. So she's got all this complication to navigate. Now, I'm going to get into Olivia's household, her servants, her family. That's kind of the subplot of this play. So Olivia has her uncle, Sir Toby Belch, staying with her. He's basically a drunk fool, and he has his friend, Sir Andrew Aguecheek, who is just as ridiculous as his name sounds. He's, I don't know what we'd call it today, like a hipster, like a poser. Like he thinks he's very knowledgeable about all these things and cultured, and he's not. He's a fool. So he is staying with Sir Toby Belch, who is leading him on to think that his niece might court him and getting him to pay for everything. So he's enjoying the generosity of Sir Andrew Aguecheek. They're basically drinking buddies. Then we have Malvolio, who is Olivia's steward, and he's a puritanical, really hard-nosed guy. And then we have Mary, or Mariah, or Maria, as she's alternately called, who is Olivia's serving woman or gentlewoman. And then we also have Feste the Jester, who kind of goes back and forth between Olivia's house and Duke Orsino's court, who's a very clever fool. He says a lot of wise things, and I think from what I remember, I think he's one of the more refined fools in the plays as I can recall, and he says a lot of things you'll want to pay attention to. So what happens with all these people is that basically Toby Belch and Andrew Aguecheek are annoying, carousing drunk in the middle of the night. You can imagine how frustrating that would be to have people partying in your house when you're trying to sleep. And Malvolio gets really upset with them. And so those guys, along with Mary, devise this revenge. And they trick him into thinking that Olivia, his boss, is in love with him. So they get him to do all these ridiculous things to the point where Olivia thinks he's crazy, and then they lock him up and make him think he's in a madhouse and just kind of torment him because they're getting revenge on how he's treated them. So that takes them pretty much through most of the play. And now we also have Sebastian, who is Viola/Cesario's twin brother, who did not die in the shipwreck, but was rescued by a man named Antonio, who becomes his devoted friend and is helping him throughout the play. Now, Sebastian is going to go to Orsino's court, which Antonio can't follow him there because he, I think, fought him before, so he's an enemy. It would not be safe for him to go. So they part ways. And then things get a little crazy. So I'll tell you what happens towards the end of the play, but it's going to make a lot more sense when you see it. It's obviously more entertaining to see all these confusions. So, okay, here we go. So Sir Toby Belch, in addition to this trick they're playing on Malvolio, he is, I think for just his entertainment, is egging on Sir Andrew Aguecheek to a duel with Viola/Cesario. So just for their own amusement, he and his friends, I think Fabian is another one of his friends, they can try to convince both of them that the other wants to duel them. And so they get them into a duel which neither of them want to do, which is really funny when you see it on stage. And now we get into all the mistaken identities. Let me see if I can remember the order that this goes in. So Viola and Sir Andrew, their duel gets broken up by Antonio, I believe, who thinks that Viola is Sebastian and asks her for the money that he lent Sebastian. Viola is like, I have no idea who you are. And then Antonio gets arrested because he's in Orsino's court. So he thinks he's been betrayed by his friend. Viola is very confused. Meanwhile, later on, here comes Sebastian, who comes across Sir Andrew Aguecheek, who thinks was the guy he was dueling. Now Sebastian isn't afraid to duel, so he engages him. Then Olivia comes in to stop the duel, and she proposes marriage to Sebastian, thinking that's Viola/Cesario. And Sebastian goes along with it because he thinks, hey, a pretty rich lady wants to marry me? Okay, I can do that. So they get married. Then, let me see if I can remember. Then Duke Orsino comes and thinks that Sebastian is Viola, thinks he's been betrayed because he's married Olivia, who's the woman that he loves. And then everyone's on stage together and figures out who they are. And then we get kind of the wrap-up at the end where Viola and Sebastian, are reunited. Olivia's fine with being married to somebody different than she thought because he looks the same, he's cute, so that's fine. And then Orsino realizes that he's in love with Viola once he figures out she's a woman, so they pledge to get married. And then Sir Toby Belch, for some reason, marries Mary, the serving woman, to kind of make up for all the trouble he's caused with all his jokes and pranks. And then we have Malvolio, who gets released from his fake prison in Torment, and he's the only one who doesn't get a happy ending, really. Antonio gets freed. he says, "I'll be revenged on the whole pack of you," and leaves. So pretty much everyone gets a happy ending eventually after all this confusion, which is even hard to keep track of when you're watching. It's ridiculous. So we start off really easily with all this unrequited love and beautiful language, and there's a lot of music, and then it gets crazier and crazier and crazier, and then everything pretty much works out. So that's my best at introducing the plot. I hope that will be helpful when you watch the play. Now, I have a really strong recommendation for the version you should watch, and this is a 2012 version of A Twelfth Night that was performed at the Globe Theatre in London, which is a really faithful recreation of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, and it also transferred to Broadway. It was very successful. And the beautiful thing about this production, and first of all, it's excellent, but it also is done in the original practice, which means it's done as close to how they think it would have been performed in Shakespeare's time as possible. So all the actors are men, which when there's a man pretending to be a female character who's disguising herself as a man is just like the layers are really entertaining. And even the costumes are very faithful to the time. I heard that the buttons were molded from a button mold from 1601 that they found in a museum. It's just done beautifully. But the reason that I really recommend this version is, first of all, you see it in the Globe Theatre. So what a wonderful introduction to Shakespeare's actual time. You can feel the energy between the audience and the players, and the comedy is done really well. It's done better than any other version I've seen. And you can really hear it because it's spoken theatrically. It's not spoken kind of naturally in how we might try to modernize it and make it sound natural. It's spoken very clearly. The comedy is great. The physical comedy is great. All the visual gags are amazing. And I think everyone will enjoy at least some of it. It's just, there's something I learned in theater called the physics of comedy, and it's just why I think I Love Lucy is still funny like 70 years on, because it's like science. Like the way you do certain things is just funny, and it just endures and translates. So this version is available to rent for streaming or to buy for a download, and I'm going to link those options for you there. I recommend it so strongly that if you have trouble securing this, please email me and I will sort you out. I've watched other versions. I'll link a free YouTube version also. It's not as good. It's just not as clear. And Mark Rylance plays Olivia. He was I think the first artistic director of the Globe Theatre, and he is not a William Shakespeare believer. I don't think he believes in Francis Bacon being the author, but he believes someone else. Maybe, I don't remember who else. But anyway, it's amazing that he was the artistic director of the Globe, not being a William Shakespeare believer. And he's fantastic. I think some of the comedy even translates to something Olivia thinks a stupid thing she said when she was flirting with this guy. I'm like, I just did that. This is just the same thing as it was 400 years ago. The comedy really translates, and you can really feel like you're there in the theater in Shakespeare's time. And so when I started watching this version, I was laughing so hard and just so delighted to share this with you. So when you watch it, I hope you'll be really entertained. All the end, the confusion is just magnificent. So that's the version I recommend. I will, like I said, I'll link to how to secure that below. And I will just give some quick thoughts on themes and kind of deeper meanings, or what's standing out to me now that you may also want to think about. And I'd love to hear what stands out to you and what you think about. Because the thing about Shakespeare is you can have an interest in so many different things, and if you bring that to Shakespeare, you'll find something for it. I was in a used bookstore not too long ago, and I saw this huge book. It was a really big book, and it was all about astrology and Shakespeare. And in the beginning of this play, there's a joke about Taurus. You know, there's just, and actually in a there was a Meru event in 2011 at the Minnesota Summer Conference, and there was, I think, like a half an hour discussion on the line from Julius Caesar, "Beware the Ides of March," and what that means. And it was just, I mean, that's one line, and there's so much wisdom behind it. So whatever interest you have, there's a lot of music in this play, and it's done really well in this production. They don't sideline it; they really integrate it in a way that I think is helpful. So there's music. There's, of course, if you're interested in history, if you're interested in psychology, if you're interested in poetry, there are so many things to look out for. Whatever you love, you're going to find in Shakespeare. So some of the themes and topics that are really relevant in this play, there's, of course, disguise, deception. What I really love about the, men playing women, dressing as men, and then you fall in love with someone who, I feel like, to me, all this disguise and the layers of disguise and deception, to me it seems like how your soul may be different in a different lifetime, but it's still you. And so I like to think that all these characters, when they fall in love with someone that, they think is something else, that you're really really discerning who that soul is. And then at the end, when you're like, oh, that is a girl, I can marry her, it's because you fell in love with the soul. And so how kind of our outer trappings are not us. There's something unchangeable that we have, that, appearances aren't, they're not only not everything, they're really not that much, of what we are. So that's how that's what I like to think about with all the disguises and the kind of gender switching that goes on in a lot of these plays, but especially this one. So there's disguises. I thought an interesting little topic was desire. So Malvolio, he has this whole kind of soliloquy about how he wants to marry Olivia and be like a rich nobleman and have fancy clothes and all this, all these things that are above his station. And he says them out loud, and it makes him ridiculous, and he doesn't get them in the end. Whereas Sebastian may have those same desires to be, well off, to be rich, to be married to someone beautiful, and Olivia just scoops him up and he goes along with it, and he gets what he and Malvolio may have wanted the same thing, but he doesn't say it out loud. So he gets what he wants, and Malvolio doesn't get what he wants. And I just thought that was really interesting how they say, if you're doing an alchemy, not to talk about it. So I don't know. I just thought of that when I heard that kind of topic come up. Another big one is extremes and balance. So Malvolio is like a Puritan, which was, a hot topic. Then the English say they celebrate Thanksgiving because that's when they got rid of all the Puritans. So Malvolio is just really extreme and puritanical. And Toby Belch is a drunkard, so he's on the other end. And then also Olivia is so extreme in her mourning for her dead brother that she doesn't want to let life in, and that's very extreme. And then Orsino's love for her is very extreme. So there's a lot of examples of extremity, and then there's also what that entails is balance, which is something that we're always taught to find and to seek, is balance in all things. So one thing that kind of dovetails with that is comedy itself, comedy and fun and lightheartedness. And there are a lot of dirty jokes in this play that are really funny, and there's a lot of silliness that's funny that I think sometimes when I come at something from a very kind of like pure and lofty angle, you kind of miss a little bit because you don't want to shut things out completely. That's part of balance. And one of the characters says to Malvolio, "If there are no cakes and ales, just because you're the way you are, just because you're a Puritan, doesn't mean there's not going to be merriment. It doesn't mean that it ceases to exist." So I think this play kind of explores the morality of comedy or the appropriateness of comedy, and I just think that is an interesting thing to think about, especially because the language is so beautiful, and in other productions that I've seen, it's treated so seriously that all the jokes are ironed out of it. And that is not even a balanced way to present the play, because while the language is beautiful, all the visual comedy is pretty broad. And so it's like that Saint Germain quote I shared with you in the introduction video, that you're tricking the carnal mind. So you're laughing at something stupid while you're hearing this beautiful language that is becoming part of you. And I think that hearing this language, and especially if you find a passage or a phrase that really speaks to you, I encourage you to, if there's a little passage you want to memorize, to speak it out loud. Because hearing it is an experience, but speaking it is a different experience. And I just think even if you don't fully understand it, it's still doing something on some level for you. So those are the main themes I wanted to point out. Also, there's an interesting discussion, especially between Orsino and Viola, about the nature of a man's love and a woman's love, and if a man's love is stronger than a woman's, and they have this kind of beautiful discussion about that. I think that's a really interesting little beat in this play. It gives women a we're pretty strong. You don't know what we go. You don't know about our love. It's more than you know. So I really enjoy that little back and forth. And also, maybe someone will help me out with this. There are a lot of pleadings to time. Time, thou must untangle this knot. I can't do it. I'm just going to let time work it out. Also, Olivia says, what is decreed must be so, something that I think is along that same line, but also is something that I think a lot of you will take a different meaning towards, what is decreed, what you say, let that happen. We all know the power of the spoken word, so I really loved that phrase when I heard it. And there's another character who asks time to figure something out for them, which I can't remember the exact instance. But those are a couple things that stood out to me, and I'm not sure exactly why, so that's something I'm going to be thinking about as well. I think that is all I have at the moment. I'm really excited for you to watch this. The version I'm recommending is just shy of 3 hours, which sounds like a long time, and I didn't plan to watch it all in one sitting. But I made it through 2 hours because it was just so entertaining, I didn't turn it off. So however you want to watch, whatever version you're watching, don't feel pressured to watch it all at once. I think it's fine to stop and start, and if it's something you're not finding you're really interested in, take it a little bit at a time. I also have listened to it when I'm at work. I've just put on one of the YouTube videos just to hear the language in the background, because that's something I dorkily enjoy. But just see how much it entertains you. As someone who loves theater, and I've been to the Globe a couple times, it's a beautiful place, and just to see it on that stage and imagine you're there and in Shakespeare's time, and how well done it is, I think is just, it's so incredible that they were able to capture that on film, and it's filmed beautifully. So I'm really excited for everyone to watch this. Please email me at shakespearemonth@gmail.com with any questions or observations you have. If you would like to tell me your experience. You can also like record a voice memo and email that if you don't want to type. And if there's anything you want to talk about or have me talk about, let me know, and I'll do a video later in the month, or answer questions, or share, observations if you give me permission to do that, so we can all share our experiences of this play. And what I'll just close with is, I think reading this play now, it's like theater. Like, a theater performance is never the same. You see one performance and that's the only time that exists, because it's different all the time. And I think when I read or see a Shakespeare play, I'm different every time, and so I get something different out of it. So just go easy with yourself, engage with this as much as you want, and just let me know how we can explore this more together this month. So I will leave you with that, and I look forward to hearing about your experience with Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, or What You Will. Bye.